welcome back to the Deep Dive. Okay, you've brought us some really fascinating material today. We're diving deep into Reeves, looking at bits from his classic book, Reality in Advertising.
Yeah, and it's more than just, a history lesson. It's
Yeah.
a really forceful argument about what advertising fundamentally is, or maybe what it should be. Reeves had a very, well, let's just call it an unromantic view of the whole business.
Unromantic is a good word for it. I mean, we're talking about an industry spending billions, right? Billions trying to get messages out. But maybe it doesn't always grasp how it actually, works, how it sells things.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today, really, is to try and cut through all that artistic stuff, the creative noise you often hear about, and get down to these core, almost kind of ruthless principles Reeves laid out. For advertising that actually functions, that's effective.
What did he actually think advertising's job was?
And the sources you've pulled together, they give us some fantastic historical context and some really vivid examples, great analogies to help understand where he was coming from. All right, let's get into it then. Reeves seems to kick things off by tackling what he saw as a major problem, this idea that advertising is some kind of art.
Yeah, he doesn't mince words. He basically says ads are purely functional things. That's the quote. And so the only criterion that matters is whether they succeed as ads, not whether they're beautiful works of art. He really pushes back against judging them like you'd judge a painting, Having some panel of distinguished gentlemen admire them, that's not the point.
So it's not that creativity is bad, but it becomes a problem when the creativity itself is the goal, instead of just maybe a tool to get something done, a functional goal.
Exactly. And that leads to what the source calls show window advertising.
A show window advertising.
It captures it perfectly, doesn't it? It's all surface gloss, but no real substance underneath. It lacks a clear point, a proposition about the product. It's just, dressed up nicely like a fancy shop window. Makes you look, maybe, but doesn't actually tell you why you should go inside and buy that specific thing.
Right. And the examples in the source are great, almost funny sometimes. It mentions macrocosmic fruits, just like huge pictures of peaches.
Giant pears.
Or ads so generic they have interchangeable parts.
Yeah.
You could literally swap the product, put a Ford where a Chevy was, and the ad still kind of works, like an assembly line for marketing.
Yeah. Or the slogans. Don't forget those. Things like tacky, tangy, tempting, appetizing. What does that even mean?
Or it's incredibly smooth. Smooth what?
Or my favorite. When women try, they go wild with joy. It's just empty puffery. It doesn't tell you anything concrete about a benefit.
It really feels like ads made in a bubble, totally disconnected from why someone actually pulls out their wallet. The source says these ads just disappear into a fog of sameness.
And what's so biting about his critique isn't don't be creative. It's more like don't be ineffective. Creativity that doesn't actually deliver a punch, that doesn't lead to a sale, well, it's just expensive wallpaper, isn't it?
Which leads us perfectly into the next really critical point from the source. Okay, if it's all about function, how do you even measure if your advertising is doing that function? It can't just be about looking good or even just being seen, right?
No, exactly. And this is where he gets into this need to understand the impact inside 180,000 heads, basically, the whole population back then. Early on, figuring out the real impact was a lot of guesswork, but research methods started evolving specifically to try and measure how well a campaign was actually landing, not just being seen, but being, understood and remembered.
Okay, and my absolute favorite analogy in the source for this is the pulled over people story. The guy with the salt. Can you tell us that one?
Oh, it's brilliant. So there's this guy in a country store, and he's just busy stacking bags of salt, piles and piles of it. The storekeeper comes over and asks him, "Do you sell salt?" And the man looks up kind of sadly and says, "No, I don't sell salt."
But he's surrounded by it. How can he not sell it?
That's the whole point of the analogy. So many companies, so many ad campaigns are just like that guy. They achieve massive penetration, meaning their ad gets seen by loads of people. They're there, like the man with his salt bags.
Right. Visible.
But they completely fail to achieve usage pull.
Okay, so what's that exactly?
Usage pull is that crucial moment where the actual story of the product, the reason somebody should buy it, gets properly lodged inside the consumer's head. They get it. They remember it.
Oh, okay. So it's not just awareness. It's understanding the why.
Precisely. The source even mentions these charts they developed, showing some companies with huge penetration. Lots of people saw the ad, but really low usage pull. People didn't remember the message. Versus others, maybe reaching fewer people, but a much higher percentage actually got the product's core story.
Wow.
So usage pull, that's the metric that answers the really vital question. Does your story actually work?
That distinction feels huge. It's not just about being out there, it's about being understood in a way that actually influences someone. And this brings us right to Rosser Reeves' most famous idea, the concept that really defines his whole approach.
The unique selling proposition?
Yeah.
Or, the USP?
The U.S.P.
Yeah.
So break that down for us. What is a U.S.P. according to Reeves and the source?
Okay, so the source lays it out pretty clearly. First, it has to be a single specific claim. You can actually state it in words.
Okay.
Second, it must offer a real benefit to the consumer, something they actually want. Third, and this is key, it has to be unique, something the competition either doesn't or maybe can't claim.
Right, unique.
And finally, it has to be strong enough to actually persuade a lot of people to move the needle on sales. He calls it the keystone, the central piece that holds the whole advertising structure up. Without it, everything else can kind of crumble.
And he put this USP idea directly against another approach that was getting popular then, the brand image theory.
Yeah, that's right. Brand image was more about building a sort of feeling, an aura around the brand using visuals, associations. It's about projecting a pleasant idea or a personality.
Whereas the USP is about projecting a unique fact or a specific benefit.
Exactly. Reeves felt that a raw and naked USP, something grounded in a concrete reality about the product, was actually the richest tapestry because it gave people a clear, distinct reason to buy, not just some vague, positive vibe.
The source gives some classic, really legendary examples of USPs in action. Listerine has to be the most famous one.
Oh, absolutely. Tackling bad breath head-on with often a bridesmaid, never a bride. Super direct. Or Lifebuoy soap and BO, body odor.
Right, naming the problem.
Colgate dental cream promoting its specific anti-decay ingredient. Or George Washington Hill's campaign for Lucky Strike cigarettes. Just that simple factual claim, it's toasted.
It's toasted, yeah.
All of these were specific, unique claims tied directly to the product or how you use it.
They weren't just selling a mood or an image. They were selling a solution or maybe a distinct feature. The source uses another neat analogy here, the 3 big roads to Rome, to talk about how tough it can be to actually find this uniqueness.
Yeah, it points out that, finding uniqueness in the product itself gets harder as products become similar, competitors catch up.
Okay.
Finding uniqueness just in how you make the ad, the creative execution, that's tough too because styles get copied really fast. But the third road, which Reeves argued was often the most effective, following pioneers like Claude Hopkins, was finding a unique claim about the sale or the use of the product, like showing how Listerine worked as an antiseptic, focusing on the function.
So finding that unique claim, that USP, that's what helps your ad break through the fog of sameness we mentioned earlier. The source calls it an advertising burning glass.
Right. It focuses all the energy, all the selling power onto that one core proposition, makes it much more likely to cut through the noise and actually achieve that usage pull.
Okay, so if you're going to actually apply this reality-first approach, you need to watch out for some pitfalls. The source talks about advertising having 2 faces.
The Dr. Jekyll face, that's the creative, the artistic side, and then the Mr. Hyde face, that's the effective, results-driven reality side. And the source is basically saying, look, when you're trying to figure out if your ad works, you got to focus on Mr. Hyde.
The reality check. And part of that reality check involves being a bit skeptical about certain research methods, right? Ones that might lean more towards speculation than solid results. The source calls out motivational research here, dubbing it the Madison Avenue lure.
Yeah, the worry expressed there is that this kind of research can get lost in Freudian deep diving, trying to uncover these hidden persuaders based on assumptions about subconscious desires.
Right.
The source argues this can lead to guesswork, maybe even manipulation, instead of basing the message on proven consumer needs and desires that you can actually, verify.
And the most vivid example of what happens when you prioritize the art, or maybe the guesswork, over the reality.
Yeah.
That's the source calls the vampire video. Such a great term.
It really is powerful, isn't it? The vampire video is an ad that looks fantastic. It's visually stunning, maybe entertaining. It might even win awards. And it does get attention.
Yeah.
But it draws all the attention to itself. It sucks strength away from the message, as the source puts it. It either hides the USP completely or just pushes it way into the background.
So the amazing visuals or the funny comedian or whatever,
Yeah.
that becomes the star, not the actual reason to buy the product.
Exactly. The examples given are things like ads using gorgeous shots of water skiing or dancers or cool animated patterns that are eye-catching but totally unrelated to the product's benefit,
Uh-huh.
or ads where all the focus is on the celebrity presenter, or even that weird example of a Labrador retriever in a vestige. The attention goes to the performer, not the product's promise.
So people remember the ad, but they have no idea what it was selling.
Precisely. The ad itself is memorable, but the selling message is completely lost. The source talks about methods they used, like the ad advertising tool, to try and spot this. By breaking the ad down, just listening to the audio, put the voice under, or just watching the visuals, they could test if the core claim was actually getting through on its own. Remember the tiny bubbles test?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah.
Where the audio track alone worked, but adding distracting visuals killed the message.
Exactly. And they contrast that with other examples, like some hair tonic or race ads mentioned, where maybe the U.S.P was technically in the script, the words were there, but the visual presentation was so weak or maybe confusing or just disconnected that the message just didn't land. It fell flat. The visuals and the audio need to work together with the U.S.P, reinforcing it, not fighting it or burying it.
Okay, and this need for clarity, for effectiveness,
Right.
it's not just a one-shot deal, is it? The source really stresses the challenge of keeping ads impactful over the long haul. It talks about the life expectancy of advertising.
Yeah, it's definitely not permanent. Ads have to run at top speed all the time, as the source says. They mention studies showing that even for really successful campaigns, half the audience forgets the core message after just 6 months.
6 months? Wow.
Plus, you always have new people coming into the market who haven't seen it before.
So you can't just coast on past success. You need continuous, effective effort, which really highlights what the source calls the main million-dollar error. Sounds serious.
It is. It's basically the massive amount of money wasted when companies spend fortunes achieving huge penetration, getting the ad seen everywhere, but completely fail to get usage pull.
Back to that distinction.
Millions spent showing people something that had no clear point, no memorable benefit that actually stuck in their heads, just wasted money.
So how do you avoid that giant mistake? The source lays out 3 basic principles for managing campaigns long-term, especially about whether to change your ad copy or stick with it.
Right. First, if you've got a story, a campaign, that's genuinely brilliant and you know it works, don't mess with it. Don't change it unless you somehow stumble onto something even more brilliant, which is super rare.
Okay, stick with what works.
Second, if you do have that brilliant campaign and you run it consistently, it puts your competitors in a really tough spot. They can't easily pass you. Consistency becomes a weapon. And third, a really great campaign can keep working for as long as the product itself isn't, totally obsolete or outmoded by something much better.
The source uses the Dodge campaign as a big success story here, right? Sticking to a clear U.S.P for years, and sales went up significantly because of it.
Yeah, it's presented as a powerful case study showing that consistency with a strong, relevant message often beats chasing novelty just for the sake of change.
And this applies even in today's really fierce competitive world, what the source calls the new entrepreneurs, where established companies are constantly fighting off challengers and having to innovate.
Well, what's interesting is the source suggests that sometimes in that competitive frenzy, especially with new companies trying to break in, they can actually forget these basic principles. They forget the absolute need for a clear message or maybe for genuine product improvement, and that can lead to them failing, even with lots of funding.
So if you boil it all down, Reeves is arguing pretty forcefully that advertising's real power doesn't come from some kind of mysterious creative magic or just making things look pretty.
No.
It comes from actually offering real desired improvements to people and then acting like a relentless salesperson, just focused laser-like on getting that core effective message, that drainage, as he calls it, lodged firmly in the consumer's mind.
Yeah, it's about substance winning out over pure style, functionality being the ultimate measure.
So this whole deep dive into Rosser Reeves' reality in advertising, it really serves as a pretty stark reminder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Advertising, in his view, isn't primarily art. It's a functional tool. And its success really depends on finding and then clearly hammering home a unique, truthful, relevant claim that U.S.P act in a way that actually creates usage pull, not just empty awareness.
And doing that takes constant measurement, staying grounded in reality, and having the discipline, really, to stick with what's proven to work instead of just chasing the next shiny creative trend or relying on hunches.
It definitely makes you look at the ads you see every day a bit differently. Reeves talks about ad people sometimes acting like showmen or even necromancers, believing in ghosts, basically, relying on assumptions and aesthetics rather than cold, hard facts about what works.
It does raise a fascinating question for you, the listener, doesn't it? When you look at the ads you encounter, how much of it feels like it's still in that showman camp, prioritizing the art, the entertainment, and how much feels like it's in the reality camp, focused relentlessly on driving home a clear, unique reason to buy? What does that tension really mean for what actually influences you?